You read a text message, a slightly blunt comment from a friend or coworker. Your thumbs hover over the glass, and before you even consciously process the interaction, you fire off a defensive reply. Within seconds, a simple misunderstanding escalates into a full-blown digital argument. Your heart rate spikes, your breathing gets shallow. Your brain interprets the blinking chat bubble as an active physical threat, flooding your system with adrenaline and an overwhelming urge to retaliate. In these high-tension moments, traditional communication advice falls apart. Carefully curated scripts, breathing techniques, and practiced vocabulary do not survive the sudden spike in cortisol. Those catastrophic breakdowns rarely start with the actual words on the screen. The conflict originates in the unmanaged emotional state that was quietly sitting in your head before the conversation even began. We tend to view charisma and deep people skills as genetic traits. You either possess a natural talent for navigating social friction, or you don't. Leadership expert John C. Maxwell argues otherwise. Relationship skills are highly learnable, but they demand emotional readiness as a prerequisite. When we lack these internal emotional skills, we instinctively project our own insecurities outward and overreact to the people around us. This brings us to the inside-out framework. Attempting to fix the verbal output coming out of your mouth is useless if you haven't first regulated the internal psychology generating those thoughts. You cannot effectively listen to another person or speak clearly to them until you rewire how you process your own internal reality. This graphic illustrates psychologist David D. Burns' radio metaphor. Your baseline emotional state operates exactly like a radio dial, acting as a mandatory filter for all incoming communication. When your mental radio locks onto a frequency of insecurity or sadness, it automatically warps the incoming data. Your brain exaggerates negative slights, diminishes positive feedback, and hears hostility where none exists. This distortion is often activated by specific cognitive triggers. Truth triggers fire when we feel wronged. Relationship triggers respond to who is speaking, and identity triggers activate when our sense of self is threatened. These instantly hijack our rational processing. Failing to recognize these triggers in advance guarantees a breakdown. We make negative assumptions, falsely projecting malicious intent onto friends and colleagues, simply because our internal filter was knocked off balance. Identifying and managing those emotional triggers is the mandatory first step of the inside-out framework. It is the only way to stop your internal filter from distorting the objective truth of a conversation. With your internal state regulated, you can move to the second phase of the framework, accurately receiving information from the outside world. Author James Williams defines this process as active listening. It requires looking past the literal content of a statement to read the underlying emotions and intent embedded in a person's tone and body language. Achieving this level of observation means completely silencing your own ego. You have to shut down your internal judgments and suppress the urge to formulate your clever response while the other person is still speaking. Reaching this profound level of focus takes deliberate practice and sometimes requires specific mechanical adaptations. For instance, neurodivergent individuals, including people with ADHD or autism, can improve this focus by actively taking notes or explicitly practicing the interpretation of physical cues. True active listening requires the discipline to prioritize another person's emotional context over your own desire to speak. That discipline sets up the final phase of the framework, broadcasting accurate, clear, and non-defensive output. High-stakes or highly emotional conversations must happen face-to-face. Text-based communication strips away the physical cues and vocal tones required to accurately read someone's intent, creating a breeding ground for misunderstandings. When you do broadcast your perspective, rely on concise language. Use I feel statements to express your personal boundaries, describing your own emotional reaction instead of launching an unfair accusation at the other person. If the conversation turns hostile, look at this logic tree mapping out a conversational attack. Taking the path of defensiveness triggers a fast-expanding conflict spiral. But there is a second path, David D. Burns' disarming technique. The mechanics of disarming are simple but rigorous. You locate a tiny sliver of objective truth within your critic's attack and openly validate it. Agreeing with even a fraction of their complaint instantly neutralizes their hostility. Effective broadcasting is never about winning an argument or asserting dominance. It is about expressing your boundaries clearly while actively engineering a de-escalation of the room. Let's apply this complete inside-out framework to that hostile text message scenario from earlier. You read the blunt comment, but this time you execute a pause. You recognize the cognitive trigger spiking your heart rate. You let go of the negative assumption that the sender is attacking you, and you keep your mental radio tuned to a clear frequency. Instead of retaliating, you actively listen to the intent beneath their words, and you repeat the core issue back to them, validating their perspective. Executing these internal and external mechanics stops the escalation spiral dead in its tracks. The interaction instantly transitions from combat to collaboration. Beyond the mechanical tactics of de-escalation, we have to look at why we build these relationships in the first place. We rely on interdependence to survive. John C. Maxwell splits communication styles into two identities based on this reality: harmers who act selfishly and drain those around them, and helpers who operate with the deliberate intention to uplift others. Consistently treating people with high regard, celebrating their successes, and maintaining mutual trust requires continuous effort. It is the ultimate long-term investment you can make in your social network. Mastering communication is not a matter of memorizing the right things to say. It is the quiet, rigorous internal work required to become a person who naturally builds trust and deep connection in every area of life.